This is Michael from Bethel. Thanks for joining us for our pep talks for perplexed parents. I'm going to hand the microphone over to my good friend, Roxanne Theroux. Roxanne, please.
Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are so excited to hear this talk tonight in panel discussion on sports and faith. I'd like to introduce James Avery to you. He has been a friend of our family for over 20 years. We were just discussing it tonight and can't believe it's been over 2 decades already. James is passionate about sports. He's passionate about faith. He loves sharing Jesus with people that he meets. And I would just welcome him to introduce everybody on the panel tonight. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to be here. Great to serve at Bethel. I feel incredibly blessed to be able to be sitting up here with three people who really mean a lot to me. And without further ado, I'll kind of give you a brief introduction of the three people, and we'll get into our talk. What we want to do is I'll ask each one of our panel people a specific question. After that, we're going to open it up live to any questions that you would have. So get your fingers ready to type in some questions or hit that raise hand button. Or if we're live, you have a question, just come up to the mic so everyone can hear you, and that would be good. So the first person that I have the honor of sitting beside is Mr. Kavis Reed. And I was thinking about what could I say about Kavis. I think if you know Kavis, you can easily Google him and find out that he's an all-star CFL player. He was a head coach in the CFL, served in a lot of different coaching capacities, was a general manager for the Montreal Alouettes. But probably the biggest thing that I admire about Kavis is the way that he's always lived life with faith and integrity. And especially in a world of sports that needs it. And you've always been able to bring faith into what you do. That's who you are. You're definitely a brother in the faith to me and an influence in my life. And so thank you for being here. Sitting next to Kavis is our good friend Jordan. Jordan's been on the sports ministry team here at Bethel for about 5 years, going on 5 years. Jordan's claim to fame, and we'll talk about this a little bit, is as a collegiate level volleyball player, Jordan decided to start a chapter of Athletes in Action for Grant MacEwan University when he was playing there, and did some amazing things. And Jordan's a brother to me, and we have a great relationship. I love hanging out with you. So thanks, Jordan, for being here. And next to Jordan is Ashley. Ashley will be coming hopefully on the summer team for a second summer. Ashley is also a high-level collegiate volleyball player who has an amazing story. So I'm not going to say too much about her story. I'm going to probe more into Ashley's story as we explore this connection with faith and sport. And so without further ado, Kavis, the question that I kind of would like to start off with and have us ponder is that often people are perplexed about how faith and sport go together. Sometimes we can see them as opposite. What would you say to people who ask that question? Do faith and sport intersect, or do they have to be completely opposite?
No, I know for sure 100% that the two need to be, should be, and is intertwined. We say that God is omnipresent, God is omnipotent, God is omniscient. He's everywhere, he knows everything, and he's all powerful. And he doesn't segment the segments of society that his presence is going to be and where it's needed. He's needed in everything. And I'm very much a proponent of understanding that we are never going to achieve anything in life, be it in our personal lives as family members, be it in our relational lives as friends, be it in our jobs, our careers, and in sports. Whenever we endeavor, God should always be first, in front, and a part of it. Sports, growing up in the States, we've always had a spiritual presence. Grew up where it is a part of the culture. Introduced to FCA very early in my career. High school football games, we always had a chaplain that prayed before. The teams always got together afterwards and prayed together afterwards. So I grew up in a culture where there was an interconnection. My grandfather was a Baptist minister, and he knew that at 12:30 on a Sunday we need to be out of service because NFL football is coming. And so he knew that sports was very important in our lives. But how did it interact in our faith? Sports, music, and food bring people together. Mm-hmm. What a great opportunity to have a platform to share the truth in the gospel.
Yeah, and I love that, Kavis. And as I know you, can you maybe tell us a story or touch on, some very impactful faith moments in your career? Definitely, you've had some adversity, you've had some celebrations, and I know that you've had amazing conversations with teammates, with players that you've coached, and with coaches that you've been the boss of. And so, do you want to just kind of share a moment or two with us to give us a glimpse of just how important that faith is in the day-to-day?
Yeah, more probably the best example I can give is the end of my playing career. At the time, I was a 26, 27-year-old that was getting ready to be at the peak of his career.
And so I know that you're a humble guy. And so for people, Dr. Google doesn't lie. We can search up Kavis's name, and I think you're still tied for most interceptions in the CFL. Your career's shining. You're playing probably one of the best teams in the CFL at this point, right? You're not playing for the best team, but you're playing the best team. And you go up to intercept the ball, and there's a tragic event that happens, and so you break your neck. You didn't know you broke your neck at that time, but so that's kind of that's setting the tone. So I didn't want you to be humble, but this is a big deal for you in achieving these milestones.
Yeah, and at that moment when the incident happened, I could see a lot of things flashing before you. And there was never a time laying on the field where I was feeling sorry for myself. I never had that moment where I felt sorry for myself. In fact, I remember distinctly the words I told one of the team physicians is, "Go get my wife because she's going to have a baby." It's like literally like she's going to be upset. Those are the words I remember, and I can remember hearing conversations, and I was more concerned that my wife Darlene's going to be upset with me. And so I made certain, and by chance they did the right thing, they went and got her, so that we were okay there. But my career, I knew at that moment was done. I knew laying on the field it was done. I always said that I was not going to risk health for a game, and I knew it was done. The ride to the hospital was one where I was in a lot of pain. It felt like someone poured gasoline on me and lit me on fire, and the nerves were very, very excited. The ride home that night, any little bump that Darlene hit, I felt a vibration. But all throughout that ride, I was at peace because I knew it was done. It was time for a next chapter. God had turned the page for me. It was time to move on. Waiting at home for a month before the surgery took place, one of my neighbors, who was a non-believer but worked at Christian radio, dropped off a CD. And one of the songs was, "The battle is not yours, it's the Lord's." Mm. And I listened to that song repetitively, trying to hear what's next. And all the while, I was at peace with, I'm not playing anymore. What's next? That was the question, what was next? There were moments where you go, man, I'm at the pinnacle of my career. Where am I going? What's going to happen next? So you're wrestling with God to say, what's next? No, He'll reveal it in time. Take care of what needs to be taken care of next. So that, not tragedy for me, a lot of people see it as a tragedy, was really God showing again His presence, because He says, this is not your life, it's His. Once you give it to Him, it's His. So we have to be willing, as a high-performing athlete, to surrender even that to the will of what God wants in our lives.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I love that as we talk about surrender, and I think it's a great segue for the question that we have for you, Jordan, and I know that there's going to be people coming back to UK in a little bit, but Jordan, I think it'd be fair to say that as you grew up, there were times where you felt on the periphery of church. I really, you and I are kind of kindred spirits. Not the best singers in the world, although
What are you talking about?
Ashley did say something about Hannah Montana and a tryout, so we'll figure that out.
You'll have to hear his Under Pressure duet. It's really good.
Okay. But as somebody who at some points would say that you felt maybe on the periphery of church, can you walk us through, you're playing at a high level and God lights a fire in you to be a very strong witness, start an Athletes in Action chapter, a Bible study for university level athletes at a secular school. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, of course. So essentially, when I hit my university years, when I finally graduated, I went to Strathcona Christian Academy for most of my life, and faith was surrounded by me, and like the Christian religion was surrounded by me every single day. But I would say things got very stale, and the same thing over and over again just became the meaning of the gospel just lost its effect on me, and I would say went away from my faith for I'd say a solid 6 months, 6 to 12 months. It was just kind of this hiatus, and it was some of the worst and lowest points in my life. My first semester, I remember feeling pretty depressed, and just like there was this emptiness. Just focusing basically on managing my school and then my 4-hour commitments to volleyball. With playing volleyball at a high level, there's 2-hour practices, and then you have an hour workout that you have to do, as well as stretching and stuff like that after practice. So it's a 4-hour commitment pretty much most nights plus school. So I was trying to manage that, but on top of that, faith wasn't just something that was on the back burner for me, which was new because I'd gone to high school, and you hear about Jesus probably, you pray once in a while here and there, and it just became this emptiness that God wasn't part of my life for a little bit. So I hit this really big low. I remember distinctly between my first and second semester, right around Christmas. Christmas is my favorite time of year, and I was just like literally like in such a low, like what is missing? And I remember my fiance, one of her uncles, actually, I was at a Christmas party with them, and she was like, "Have you ever heard of Athletes in Action?" And basically from there on, I got put in touch with someone from Athletes in Action, and basically Athletes in Action, like James said, is an organization that's basically with university athletes. They essentially teach you about Jesus and stuff, and teach people who are playing sports how you can incorporate sport into your faith, and that those two things, like Kavis was saying, can go together. And in fact, a lot of people may not believe it, but that's a way of worship, to be able to play and worship by using your body in that way. So that was a nuance for me that kind of lit this fire that I can actually go on the court and have play and give it up my all, and realize that I'm glorifying God through that. And that was this nuance that really lit a fire for me. But that's kind of how I describe that. And over my time at Athletes in Action, I led some of my secular teammates into a few of the sessions where we did Bible studies, and they started to ask me questions about my life, like, why do you do this? Why do you go to church on the weekend? Why do you not come to parties too much and stuff like that? Like, what are the reasonings behind that? So I got put in a lot of interesting conversations just because of that connection. And in fact, now at MacEwan, there's I won't say because of my influence. I was one of the trailblazers of the MacEwan Athletes in Action, and now there's probably about 10 to 12 people that go there continuously now as a part of their life. So I've been able to definitely do that and help for myself. That's been something really good. But overall, I'm blessed, and that I had that opportunity to do that. But definitely God worked through that. That was the Spirit who facilitated those actions through me. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jordan. I love that. And you and I have talked about this a lot, and I love that understanding that as I'm competing at a high level, as I'm pushing my body as much as I can possibly push my body as I'm performing, I'm giving glory to God, because He's an amazing God who gave us the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's so cool. But one of the pitfalls maybe is now confusing our identity with our performance. And that kind of brings me to you, Ashley, because this is a journey that you've had to walk through, and we can walk through together with you. But can you tell us a little bit about your struggles in doing that, being very successful, and then having a potentially season-ending injury, and kind of going through those pitfalls of trying to figure out, who am I?
Yeah, of course. So for me, a little bit about my background is that I started playing volleyball when I was in grade 7, kind of following in the footsteps of Big Brother kind of thing. Always was my role model growing up and still today. But I saw him playing, and I kind of knew at like a pretty young age that I wanted to play at the college level. And that's kind of what I had focused on, like the next, 5-6 years. That was my goal that I was working towards. And so U17 is the year that the coaches do most of their scouting. And so like I was preparing to have a big year, emailing coaches kind of thing. Because my dream was to play like at the university level, like U sport kind of thing. And then one Sunday we had like an exhibition game, and I jumped really awkwardly and I came down and I tore my ACL. And I was out for the entire season, just was gone. And I remember my first reaction was just anger. And I'd never really questioned God or ever felt like any anger towards him, but that was probably the first time in my life that had ever happened. And I remember my first question was like, why God? Like, why would you do this to me? Like, this was the most important year of my volleyball career, and this is jeopardizing every single thing that I worked towards, and it's all gone now kind of thing. And I remember that was probably like the darkest moment of my life, and even like those next few weeks and months after that, just there's a lot of times where I was just pitying myself and, like, woe is me. My life is awful because I love volleyball so much and I can't do the thing that I love the most. And it wasn't until, honestly, I'd say probably around the time when I was getting my surgery, which is about 3 months after. And I remember one of the pivotal moments was this girl at my school came up to me and she asked, she felt called to pray for me. And it was just at like a chapel that we had, and like that was the first time anyone's ever come up to me and said that, and we never really talked that much in school either. And I was just kind of taken aback a little bit by it. And I remember when she was praying for me, I felt like filled with the Holy Spirit, and I hadn't felt full in a very long time. I felt very empty and dark for a while, and I kind of pushed myself away from God a lot. And that was kind of one of the things that really drew me back towards God. And I remember going in for surgery, and I'm someone who's afraid of like needles. Like I was petrified of getting vaccinated just because like I don't like their little needle. And going into that, I knew I would have to get put out, so I'd have to get IV, and I was just terrified thinking about that. And even just, it's the great unknown. My body is completely in God's hands, and with surgeons, there's nothing I can control about this. And so that was definitely a test of faith for me. And I remember being in the waiting room in the hospital, and I felt oddly at peace. I didn't feel worry. I didn't feel pain. I felt light. I felt airy, and I had this hope. And it was just the most odd thing, because I thought, I was a nervous wreck like 2 days before, and here, like the moment that was like built up, the climax, I felt at peace. And just seeing how God has worked through me with this injury has been incredible. And just the ways that he's pushed me, like I had this drive in me to get better. Like I remember I would stay up on a school night and I would be doing physio past like midnight. Like I'd do my schoolwork and then I'd do my physio. And honestly, looking back, I don't know how I did that. It was kind of crazy, but God, I knew, like looking back on it, that God was with me the entire way, holding my hand, walking me through this process together. He hadn't left me like I thought he did. And I know some people would see like injuries as like, oh, there's a reason behind like why I got injured, or like, oh, this is a punishment from God. And I don't really see it as that. At one point I did. But I don't see it as a punishment from God. I was just doing what I love, and I got hurt. And I mean, even when you look at, you know, little toddlers, they get hurt all the time, and they still get back up. And there wasn't a big reason behind it. They just fell and scraped their knee. And I mean, mine might have been a bit more than a scrape, but yeah. And another kind of part of my story was just how beautiful everything kind of fell into place. Someone told me once that God does his best work in the dark and in hard moments in your life. And he really, like, this whole injury, I never thought that it would take me to the places that it did. I currently play at the King's University, and that was not at all where I thought I was going to go in my career, but God totally opened up this door for me. I had a couple offers for colleges, and one of them was U Sport, which is my dream, my childhood dream as a kid, and it was a redshirt offer. And I remember, like, I had a few months to think about that, and eventually I made the decision. I was like, okay, like, this has been my dream, that's what I want to do. And so, like, I was actually going to tell the coach that I wanted to take her offer, and then the next day, I got a call from the coach, just to touch base, and she was kind of discouraging me from taking the offer. She said, like, I'm not going to retract the offer, that's not who I am. But she was just kind of saying, you know, the gym, there's going to be about 20 players, and I don't know how much court time you'll get, especially since you're coming off an injury. So that was, to me, that was God closing that door. And when I look back, my current coach had never seen me play. The only video she saw of me was when I was 16, and I was like 18 at the time, and it was honestly just amazing that she would take a chance on me like that, and that was completely God doing that work. And I would never be at the place that I am without that, and without this injury. It's been the biggest blessing in disguise, and it's really formed who I am too. Like, I'm just so much more resilient and tough, and God has built so much character in me. And honestly, that injury is probably what saved my faith, I'd say, because I kind of let it go on the back burner as well. But this was, to me, kind of God kind of calling me back in and reeling me back in, and it's definitely a point of renewal for me. And now that I kind of made that choice, after that, I was like, this is where I'm going to pursue my faith fully. And I was just kind of saying, hey, I'm all in, God. I'm yours. So
that's awesome. And, you know, it's God's taking you to lots of conversations and lots of places. But, yeah, we really want to open it up for people to ask questions. And there's kind of no limits to the questions. When we think about faith and sport, it can be any questions from how do we fit church life into a very busy athletic schedule? Or what do I do when my son or daughter is playing on a team and the coaches seem to be not the most positive people, or the environment's not the most positive? And so we really want to use our life experience and our experience in athletes or in athletics to be able to answer questions. And so we want to hear from all of you. What questions do you have?
You raised when the word. You raised up where we're just entering into this age where our oldest is in grade 10, and his sport is curling, which is fun, and he just got invited on to a more competitive team. U15 moving into U18, but provincial silver medalists, like, and we're seeing the commitment. We've had 6 weeks of this, and so this was 6 weeks was a great opportunity for us to kind of figure out, does this fit? Is this good for our family? Is it good for what our priorities are? Part of our move last August was very much to come here because church is central. We wanted to find a place for Christian school. Our kids are going to SCA and Bethel. Those two were big factors of us choosing Sherwood Park to move to. And so now there's this stretch. We want to support him. And he feels that struggle too. He said he doesn't want to miss church on Sunday mornings. He's mourns when he can't be here at youth or at worship, but also is intrigued with this opportunity. So for somebody for him, who faith is most important right now still, he hasn't gone that journey yet as far as what you were talking about. We want to know how we kind of balance that and encourage that. So any advice?
Yeah. For sure. So I can start. This is something that even as a pastor, it was something that we struggled with as my son Nathan got better at football and was invited to a whole bunch of different camps and played on different teams and had some coaches that decided that they wanted to practice on Sunday. We really had to figure out what are we going to do and how are we going to do this. And so, in the metric of our life, we actually, the first thing we did was we talked to him. And said, we really need to make sure that as a family, God is center. And so we're going to talk about this and what are the outcomes and what are we going to do. And what we found is that we met with the coaches and we said, if there's a practice on Sunday at 11, Nathan's probably going to be a little bit late because we're going to church at 8:30. And he'll be here and he'll be ready to go, but just understand this is the reality of the ebbs and flows of our life. And when we did that, at first the coach wasn't incredibly happy, but what we found is there were 5 or 6 other kids on the team that had the same courage then to be able to say that, and we're able to do that. And I think that, I'm going to throw it at you in a second, Kavis, but after that too, I think one of the things that when you have that conversation, probably one of the blessings that's come out of COVID is that we can connect with our faith community at different times. And so we have a live service or a live stream service. And so as a family, you can still worship in spirit with our community. If it's in a hotel room on Sunday night, or if it's, in Tuktoyaktuk or wherever it was where we had Kate last week.
Which is our little pitch to please don't stop the online service.
We don't have plans to. So that's definitely it. But Kavis, you definitely have gone the highest in sport than any of us, and you're a faithful attender. And as you said, your grandfather, who was incredibly influential, maybe the most influential man in your life as a pastor. How did you guys navigate that?
Because we always knew that church is everywhere, and we sometimes really, it's very important to get together and worship. It's very important to have formalized services. But church is everywhere. You take it with you, and church is not relegated to 10 to 1 on Sunday. And God gives us the ability to be performing athletes and give us a stage. And that is a stage and an opportunity to spread the gospel. That is a stage and opportunity in how you do things to shine the light. So we would always tell our athletes is that you're never removed from the church when you're on the field. You're not removed from it. You carry it with you. And by the way you behave, by the way you perform, by the effort you give, you spotlight Jesus. When you have the microphone in front of you, you have an opportunity to spotlight Jesus. And your voice can reach so many people in church because you've been given that opportunity. Not disparaging the fact that there is a need for formalized services. Absolutely. But the athlete has to also understand that they carry church, just like in work. We carry church with us. We carry church in everything we do, and we have to have that kind of an attitude and that kind of approach to it.
Yeah, the church is not the building; it's the people and the family. So yeah, love that. Let's see if there's other questions.
We got a question from the Zoom room over there, Michael.
I think Roxanne just put something in the chat there.
If you want to go ahead and read that. Because I sure can't.
I can't see it.
Yeah, you guys probably can see it from right
If
there.
you have any questions, please put it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
I'll ask a question.
Sure.
Brian apparently has a question.
Okay.
I was just wondering if any of you can tell us what you felt your weakness was during your times as athletes and being in action with your Christian faith and all that.
Great question, and I'm going to throw that at Jordan. As a young man, I think all of us, not I won't say a future leader of the church, but an already leader of the church, and someone who's grown exponentially in your faith. What are some of those weaknesses you felt or you feel currently as you're performing at a high level and you're navigating this tension?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Brian. I'll say that right off the bat as well. I think for myself, the biggest thing I've learned and the biggest area of weakness I've kind of noticed would likely be sometimes I just don't feel that I'm capable. Sometimes I just feel with the leadership that I've had and been able to do that I'm not worthy or capable of the abilities that I've been given. And over time, as I've grown and matured, what I've learned is that's the enemy trying to speak into my life. And I think for me, as an athlete especially, when you're competing at the highest level, it can bother you a lot and really dig into you when you're not playing well or having a bad practice and your identity is so filled into your sport that you get so consumed by everything. And when things aren't going the way they were planned, that's all you are as a person. And when you're playing at that level, when all the practices, all those 20 hours of work you put in the week and you're not performing on the weekend for the games, you just feel like you're not worthy. You're not a capable person. And that could just put you in a really dark space. So I know especially my first year, I went through a lot of ups and downs with that, dealing with, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be on this team. I'm not good enough. Why am I even at Athletes in Action when I was a leader? Why am I leading? I don't know all my Bible stuff. I'm not qualified to be doing some of this. It feels like that person over there, he knows way more about Leviticus than I do, or he's had way better and more profound experiences than I have had. So how I would answer that is just, that was probably my area where I struggled the most, just feeling like I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be able to speak into people's lives because I don't have the experience. And then, I kind of relate that back to, Timothy being one of the young leaders of the church. And he was someone who was young and bold and was able to lead. And I eventually came to terms that I can lead. And that's just the enemy trying to speak into my life. So I would argue that, that would probably be one of the hardest parts for me, is just not feeling worthy or capable at times in my life. And now I've grown a little bit out of that, but that was something that was very difficult to deal with during my time as an athlete. And going forward, I'll be actually returning to play at Kings next year. So I have a little bit of experience now, so I know how to deal with that. But that was for sure one of the hardest and darkest times in my life, was when I didn't feel like I was worthy to be doing what I was doing. So.
Mm-hmm. And before we go for another question, so I'll prime the pump that we'll take another question after this. But before we do that, Ashley, to protect the innocent, we're not going to say names, but we'll expedite kind of the story. This is something that we just talked about, right? And so your story, you're having a great, successful rookie season, and you tweak your knee as your team's on a playoff run. And so you're having to come to terms with not being able to finish out the season as a starter. And you shared an experience where you felt weak when one of your teammates was going through crisis. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah. I Are you talking about the girl?
Panic attack.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I was just making sure. We talked a lot the other day. and I could go on forever. Well, I think recently, our season is over now, but near the end, towards the end of the season, I was definitely kind of struggling a little bit with like my identity on the team, especially since I didn't have working towards getting back on the court. As like my goal kind of thing, I kind of had to accept this role and know like, okay, this is my role for the rest of the season.
You should mention you re-tore your.
Oh yeah.
They don't know that you tore your again.
Yeah. Well, this was an injury on my other knee. It was I partially tore my PCL for all you human anatomy lovers out there. This was a lot of. I've sat out like a decent amount just with other little tweaks and injuries over the season, but this was definitely me having to accept what my role is, and struggling with feelings of jealousy of other people who kind of took my place, and that balance of like, in my heart, I want to feel so happy for them, and that's like who I am as a person. Like I love and care so much for everyone on my team. But my head has kind of been telling me like, hey, they took your spot. Like if you were back right now, you would be playing and you would have that spot and they wouldn't be there. And just kind of letting that take over my heart a little bit and just having to push those thoughts out of my mind. That was something I struggled with. But in being on the bench, I also kind of found a new role, not only to be a voice for my team, just kind of cheering on the sidelines and also getting to see the analytical side of volleyball. Like, okay, where are the open spots on the other side of the court, but also just having building relationships with people on my team and getting close with some of them. And I think that's who I am as a person. Like I love building connections with people, and God can see that, and God has put that calling on my heart, I think, to seek others in times of need. So one girl on my team was really struggling one day in practice, and just with her mental health, and she actually couldn't finish out practice, and I thankfully was there to help her through that time of crisis. And in the moment, I was like, I don't know what I'm dealing with. Like I've never dealt with something like this before, but I could kind of hear God speaking in my mind saying, hey, you are enough. Just by being with this person and interacting with them, and speaking through them and talking them through this situation is more than enough. You're helping them in every way. So just pushing those negative thoughts out of my head. And although injuries are awful, but in some ways, it was such a great situation that I was placed in. There's so many opportunities that I have right now. Even if I'm not physically present on the court, there's a lot of different roles you can have, and that's something I've definitely learned this year. And I think God has placed me in this situation for that player on my team in her time of need. Sorry, that was a very long explanation for a short question, but
that was great. Thank you. So, are there any other questions? I think, Trixie, you had a question?
So as a parent, you're kind of, I can't say careful, but you're entrusting your children to other adults and coaches or other adults. And so just navigating some of that, because we've already noticed kind of a few little cultural things. And we're like, okay, is that kind of competitive sports? Is that just that coach, and not anything nothing fundamentally, but just some of those little things, sometimes the little chatter, sometimes the kind of competitive little digs maybe at the other teams, or just, I don't know the culture at all. So any insight you have into navigating that, okay, is my parent radar way too...
Yeah, that's another great question. And, it's sometimes I think we need to balance this. In Scripture, Paul talks a lot. He gives us analogies of training your body. He says, daily I beat my body into submission. We run this race with perseverance, not for wilting crown of celery, but for the glory that's before us, right? And so competition can be very healthy, right? But anytime humans are involved, we take the healthy things and sometimes we cross some lines, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, one of the things that I've really had to come to terms with, and I guess even self-introspection as a coach, is that we're all in this growing together and modeling and mentoring things for younger kids or other people. And as parents, sometimes we have to allow our kids to experience certain things. And so never abuse, never negative, that stuff doesn't go. But little digs or different things that are said in competition, it's actually somewhat healthy to be able to allow your child to experience that and then debrief with them after. So what did you think about that? And how do you reconcile that? And what does that go? In my mind, that's where the most growth is going to happen, because I know the truth is we're never going to be able to control anything anyone else says or anything anyone else does. But what we can control is how we respond and what we do to it. And so that would kind of be my answer. And I'm going to throw that at you, Kavis, because you can probably walk us through that a little bit better too.
No, I can see both sides of it. I can see all three sides of it, actually. The biggest thing is that, number one, I think a lot of Christians and a lot of parents of Christian athletes think that you shouldn't have that competitive fire. And I think it's quite the opposite. I think we should have more competitive fire. There should be more of a venom of wanting to succeed and wanting to be the best and wanting to defeat the competition, and having a healthy understanding of what is respectful, but also being very competitive. Those two can be a marriage. Wherever it crosses the line of respect, we're not then showing our Christian value. But in the moment of competition, as long as it's respectful, there's nothing wrong with being extraordinarily competitive. I hate to lose. I don't think I can remember ever letting my kids, they don't like playing games with me because I don't like losing. Yeah. So and that is, I believe, what God wants us to be. He wants us to be competitive. He wants us to be our very best. Otherwise, how does the light shine brilliantly? Mm-hmm. If we're not being our very best. So we're telling someone else as Christians it's okay to, be average. No. When I'm running for conditioning, I want to be first. When I'm competing, I had the approach that if I'm on the field, the thousands of people came to see me play. That's not arrogance. It's saying that my best is going to be on display. So to you, as long as the coach is not putting them into a realm of disrespect, it's okay. Competition's fine. I think Jesus wants us to be that way. I think Jesus was very competitive too.
I love that. One of the mantras as you get into the coaching world and you think there's always a debate, is culture more important than winning? And something I know that we've embraced on the team that I coach is we're saying culture is not more important than winning. But we want to win, but we want to win the right way. And we can't win without the culture. But we do everybody a disservice just by saying, have a great culture and sing Kumbaya and never win. We're not allowing our athletes to be athletes. So we absolutely want to win every time we get on the field, but we have to do that in the right way. And so I guess that would be an answer that I would give.
And as a parent of athletes, I've learned I don't say much to the coaches. I've learned that. I really don't, because it's most coaches, I would say most coaches are in it for the right reasons. Most coaches want to see the athlete excel. And from an individual to a team level, you'll be able to pick out right away those coaches that are in it to have the beer conversation that they want a championship. But most coaches want to develop the athlete. And James and I talk about this often. We've seen a tremendous shift over a generation. Listen to the presentation and award presentation by athletes. in the 80s, 90s, and dating ourselves, we used to talk about the impact of our coaches in our lives. I still text with my high school coach almost on a daily basis. We used to talk about that. And coaches, I'm talking to all the coaches, you need to be very much aware of this. The athletes used to talk about their coaches ad nauseum during presentation. Now, you seldom hear it. It's almost a surprise when you hear athletes talking about their coaches. The impact that a coach has on a student athlete's life goes beyond the court. It's a lifetime. It's a lifetime. I will put my high school coaches as in the top 10 of impact in my life. And so all you coaches out there understand that they're going to forget the score of the game, but they're going to remember the score you put on their hearts.
Yeah. Is there any other questions? Yeah, absolutely.
I love having you guys here because I'd love my kids to be in 5, 6, 8 years where you're sitting. I'm still loving Jesus and being passionate about what he's called you to be. We also know that they probably could find a whole panel of people whose kids went down a similar athletic journey and did not stay close to the Lord. And so what would you say is the difference?
I can probably jump on that.
Please, yeah, do that, Jordan.
First of all, that's a fantastic question. I actually have a lot of friends, unfortunately, that have taken that path, and it's tough to kind of see. I went to school with them at SEA actually, and they now are kind of in the agnostic route to more of the I wouldn't say atheism, but just leaning on the other side that there isn't a God. You're not caring exactly, and I think the thing that I would really say is. From what I've seen over the last 4 years in my life, which has been a very turbulent time, and I think what I can speak into your life was like between the ages of probably 16 to 25, I'm assuming still for me, it's a roller coaster. I've had so many ups and downs, and it's just trying to find that even keel throughout life. So I would say for me, it was my parents gave me the freedom to kind of work through my faith and journey. Like there's going to be times where I'm going to question the Lord, and if he's with me, similar to how Ashley, she's questioned too, but there were times where I was very far away from the Lord, and there were times where I felt very close, and there's just this kind of back and forth rocking, and I just feel like for parents it's very difficult at times because you just watch and you want to help, but sometimes there needs to almost be this like it's okay for them to kind of wrestle with the idea of, God. It's kind of hard because I feel like at a young age, you're kind of just told, you accept Jesus into your heart and you're saved and, go to church on Sunday and whatever. But you kind of come to a point where is that really all there is to it? And then you start asking those questions and it kind of becomes, oh my goodness, and then you kind of go into this big, like deep rabbit hole. And it's a journey that every person I feel like needs to eventually go through on their own. And it's a very difficult time, I think, for parents because I've seen kids go down that route and their parents, like I remember the friend I'm talking about, his mom said, like, Jordan, what happened? Like, can you pray for him? Keep him like in your mind. Like, I don't know what's going on because his sister is doing YWAMs and doing some amazing missionary work. And he is just very scientific minded and just is finding it trouble to believe that Jesus exists or that, God, and all that stuff. So faith. So for what I would say to that is, I think for myself, I had that experience. I think most people who have had a Christian upbringing will go through those times of wrestlement. And as a parent, all you can kind of do is love them and during that period of time, love on them and really try to actively listen. I think what can be hard sometimes is trying to find how much can I push them in a direction, but you kind of just have to let them almost give them, like in bowling when you have those boundaries. There's definitely boundaries where the ball needs to bounce off and you kind of need to reset them and move back and forth, but the kids need to kind of go meander and needs to figure things out, because I know for myself, I'm very lucky that I end up where I am, and that's I think because I really got that opportunity to fight through and wrestle through my faith and ask hard questions and be able to have open conversations and stuff like that. But it's totally a very valid concern. I don't know if Ashley wants to speak to that, but for me, that's what I had the freedom to kind of wrestle through that difficult time with parental guidance when I needed it. Hey mom, like I was thinking about this, like what are your thoughts on this? Or hey, even Pastor James, like hey, like I'm really struggling with this concept. And finding those mentors, that's also one more thing I'll add. Finding like a good role model, even that's something that I think parents can do, is say, you know, I might not have the best advice, but you know who might have some really good advice, and yeah, well, I don't know, that means a lot, but yeah, I mean, like, for me, like, being able to like actually talk to someone who has gone through a difficult time and like find that mentor to really help through that difficult process.
Yeah. And this might be a shameless plug, and I'm not at all trying to make it, but this is honestly something, you know, as we've developed our summer program, as we've developed things like that, and we talk about this as a staff quite often, is there's an incredible need for young people to be able to live their faith and to serve, and to understand that it's okay, you don't have to have all the right answers, but when you're out there and you're running around with kids and you're being a role model and you're doing things, your faith comes alive again.
Yes.
And I know that, you know, I've been so blessed by having you guys in my life, and all of the conversations we had, and you know, I look at it, and how many times last year did Roxanne and I have to tell you guys to go home and you're protesting because it's only been a 12-hour day and there's still more conversation to be had, right? And so that's part of it. And so I would encourage you, you know, as parents, it's not just the summer program here, but you're absolutely right. Like, I love it. You know, link your sons or your daughters up with the older kids in the church that they look up to, right? So the Jordans and the Ashleys and the Hudsons and all of the Graydon Weebs, all of those people that are playing extremely high-level athlete or high-level sports, whether they're youth sports, hook your kids up with them. And give them the opportunity to serve, to go on the missions trips. Those are incredibly important. I know for my son Nathan, in his faith and in football faith, being a pastor's kid, there was all of these challenges and everything, and he had lots of questions and lots of people around him asking him, why do you believe what you believe, and all of that. But you know, people like Michael and those junior high, senior high missions trips, so influential in his life. And so that's the advice I would give, and I'll throw that over to Ashley too, and you can kind of chime in on that. But I really wanted to say, you know, part of this, you know, developing leaders within and trying to grow the summer program the way that we are, and challenge these guys to find people to mentor, that all boils into this. And so Ashley, take it away.
Before she takes it away, and like, people like us are totally willing to talk to kids too. I love conversation. So for anyone that is watching, like, if your kid ever actually wants to talk or ask about my experience, I'm totally willing to grab a coffee. It's a blessing and an honor to just even be able to meet other people who are going through that.
He has no idea what he just said.
That's right.
Sorry.
No, I completely agree with what you were saying, Jordan, and also you as well, Pastor James. I think one of the things that definitely like saved me the most in my faith was actually challenging it. I think for most of my life, I never really challenged it or had some opposition up until tearing my ACL, and also I became friends with someone who was agnostic. And most of my friends growing up, I also went to SCA. Like, most of my close friends were all Christian. I was surrounded in like kind of this little bubble. And it wasn't until I became friends with someone who's agnostic where they really started pushing me. And I remember they asked me, like, why are you even Christian? And honestly, like, for a while, I couldn't even answer that question, because I was like, oh, like in my head, I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm just Christian because I've always been Christian.
I was raised this way.
Yeah. And then that's kind of where I started like questioning myself, like, what is my identity in Christ? Yeah. And that's where I really start to delve into those questions. And for a long time, I kind of, you know, I pushed back on those questions, like, oh my gosh, this is so scary to answer, kind of thing, or I felt uncomfortable that I didn't know the answers to these questions. But I think not knowing is also what's driven me to find the answers and has pushed me to delve into my faith. So I think a lot of the time, people, or maybe even parents I've talked to, have said that that's kind of something that they're nervous of when, you know, their kids get that opposition. But honestly, I think it's one of the best things, and it really helps define like who you are as a Christian, especially in like such a pivotal moment in your life. Like, exiting high school, entering university, that's definitely a time where people probably see the most change, and like you're leaving everything that you knew behind and going into this huge school, new classes, new everything. You're independent on your own. So I think that's a time just to kind of like let the kids breathe, let them figure out who they are, kind of like Jordan says, let them meander a little bit and develop their identity in Christ, not just as attached to their parents, but as their own entity, because faith is such a personal thing, and that's something that I've kind of come to know over the years, especially recently.
And I had a similar experience too with like when I totally would attribute my faith, and I'm very grateful. Like my parents raised me the way I am, but like me and her were talking in the car actually right here, like literally like if I like we were talking about baptism specifically, but like why are we like we were baptized because of my parents' choice to do that, but like when you ask Jesus into your heart and as a kid, it's like we just accepted that, and that just became it was all upbringing, and then eventually there's got to be this point when it takes when it becomes your own, and usually that's like naturally within the Lutheran tradition, obviously confirmation, but it's weird. We were talking, it's like it turned out later for me, I think, and it turned out later for her, I think, that was kind of like near university where it's like, you know what, it's not just the fact that my parents raised me Christian, it's the fact that I have chosen. Whether it was that moment when I hit my low and I was like, I'm going to go into Athletes in Action and try to figure this out a little bit better. But there's this kind of pivotal point, and it's different for everyone because everyone's made unique, that you kind of take your family's upbringing, which you absolutely need to kind of grow the fundamental faith aspects, and it becomes your own. It's no longer related to the upbringing. It's your own personal, unique understanding of Christ. So it's different for everyone, but I would totally recommend, like Ashley and James are saying, like, mentorship through someone who's been through that, who's gone through that tunnel, to just help through that time, because the worst thing that can happen is someone can end up going too far and they kind of didn't get that guidance back, and then at that point it's very difficult, right? With it's hard to it can get a little rocky when you have people go off, I want to say go off the deep end just with struggling through their faith, and then but that's when it's helpful that you have a mentor to talk to and speak into their life and stuff like that. So
yeah, I love that. We look at life and, in the order of creation, we see these God-given priorities for our life. And the first is that we're uniquely and wonderfully created, right? And so he breathes this breath of life into Adam, and there he is, and he's set apart from everything else. And then he's like, oh, and now it's not complete. Here's Eve. Right? And you get to have this family. And oh, by the way, here's a garden to take care of, right? And so that unique creation is so good for us to think about that, right? That first, I'm a child of God. Second priority is always family. And third is these things that I have the opportunity to be able to do, whether that's work or sports or anything else. And I wanted to throw this at you, Kavis, and because in your life, people will look at you always as a CFL player. They're always going to look at you as this guy with all of these accolades, but you are a child of God, and you're an amazing husband and a father. Mm-hmm. And so as a father, can you talk about some of the pressures that your kids felt to have to perform, not just athletically, but faith-wise as well?
I'm not an amazing husband.
You're working on it.
Yeah.
Darlene would say you're a good husband.
I'm trying to get there, but no, the biggest thing I heard from all of you here is the foundation has to be established. Mm-hmm. And once the foundation is established, whatever you build on it is going to be solid. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you're going to have to take a wall down and move a wall and change it around, and allow it to take a different shape. But the foundation is still going to be there. And with our kids, Tarek and Tyra all both know that repetitively, we just breathe in, we love you. Mm-hmm. And our kids have gotten comfortable with saying, I love you. And their grandparents reflect often is, man, you guys say I love you. Well, we say I love you because that's the Jesus telling you he loves us. Mm-hmm. And he loves us. Regardless of whether or not you won the game or you lost the game, you're loved. And when we have that identity, rooted in our hearts, we're always going to go back to it. Regardless of that journey that we may go down, you're going to go back to it. So I always emphasize to them the immutable love. So when they are in situations, they're going to know that they're going to make mistakes. And in many respects, sometimes you want them to make mistakes because then they understand where they are, they're not perfect, and where they need to go back to. And watch them do it. Don't give them answers. I think as parents, we are so quick to give answers. We're so quick to try to solve their problems. Growth doesn't happen that way. And so that's been my experience as a parent, is let them have that journey. I used to pray that my daughter would lose competitions in dance because I wanted her to learn how to handle defeat. Because if all they know is win, 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 you never grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I could stay here and talk with you guys forever. You're some of my favorite people in the world for sure. But it is that time. It's our hour's up, and so I'll throw it over to either Michael or
I do have
Roxanne.
one more thing to say.
Sure.
I got to talk to James's mom.
Oh, yes, you do.
So this fabulous young man has been a tremendous inspiration in my life. But I will never, ever again take a road trip with him, Bruce and Anthony.
Bruce can never pick a hotel room.
Ever.
That's it.
So you've raised a wonderful young man, but never, ever, ever let him, Bruce and Anthony, and myself go on a road trip.
Enough said. And so,
All right, Michael, thanks for your pointing at me. Thank you so much for the panel tonight. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for sharing your hearts. And thank you for sharing Jesus with each of us. And thank you for sharing that sports and faith are interlinked in our everyday life. And Lord, and we just are so grateful, and we can glorify God in all that we do. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, everybody who's been online. If you have any comments or anything, please contact Michael or myself. If you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. And thank you so much. I'll let Michael just say a few words, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
We do have a recording of this, which we can pass on to people later on if you'd like to review it again. But I'll echo what Roxanne said. Thanks so much. It's been good to have you guys with us, and we will see you all soon.